Good morning, John.
Good morning, Young.
How are you?
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
I'm so glad you can join my Next Wave speaker series. Yeah. John, you are former solo pilot of the Blue Angels and Sloan Fellow from Stanford Business School, a top-rated keynote speaker of number of top 500 organizations around the world. I would love to also hear your thoughts about your books that you wrote on Gratitude Group, best-selling author and expert in how a high-performance management team. Glad to be here.
Glad to be here, Young. You know, the saying "glad to be here" came from my time on the Blue Angels. And those of your audience maybe around the world, you know, that's the flight demonstration team. You know, you got the Tour de France, Franco-Checolori, there's different teams. And I remember spending 3 years of my life in the early 30s. And it informed the way I see the world the rest of the time. And I just said, what happens in high performance teams? And can we scale that to the business world? And that's been my passion in the last 2 decades.
The question that I had is that, and I have better understanding now because we spent so much time together. We tracked Himalayas mountains together in Nepal. And then you also came to my management offsite, helping us with discussing managing high-performance management teams. So I have a much better insight. But for the audience who may not understand, how does the jet pilot relative to startup companies and the managing companies and scaling companies, how does military, the high-speed airplane operations connect with what we are doing? Could you give us some insights around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the stuff translates very well and some doesn't. So you got to know the difference, right? But I remember being in Silicon Valley in 2000, 2001. So I had finished Stanford, and we all know the bubble hit that time. And a thought hit my head. I was sitting around with some of the partners going, how come? But my how come question was not how come the bubble burst. It was how come some people outperform others and some don't? How come some teams consistently outperform and some don't? How come some startup companies, some organizations consistently can outperform under changing conditions with new people every time? And I just reversed engineered what we did on the Blue Angels. So all I did, Young, is I went back and said, wait a minute, here's the challenge on the Blues. A third of my team is new every year. All my support team.
1/3?
1/3.
Wow.
Okay.
That's a lot of turnover.
A lot of turnover.
Is it by design?
It is by design.
Ah.
And so what we did is we had to adapt to our environment. Our environment was the Navy. The Navy says every 3 years you get a new job, you rotate. So it's culture. See, it all revolves around culture. If you have strong leadership and a strong culture, you can adapt to those changing situations. By the way, half the leadership was new every year.
Wow.
Half of my pilots. So six people flying. 3 of them are new in the
That's a lot of change management.
It's huge change management. And one thing we always said was, while we had process and systems, and fundamentals do matter, I call it the cadence of execution. So before every air show, we would brief, so that's the preparation, focus. But we'd get into some very unique stuff. We'd be visualizing. And I got some footage, I'll share it with you. But it's a team visualization. So 3 things I've noticed that every high performance team needs to do. We need to connect, need to align, and we need to commit. And if you think about it, that connection has to be on a heart level, not just a head level. The alignment, not only where are we going, but what's everyone's role and responsibilities? Okay, easy. Commitment. When I strapped into that jet, I was willing to give my life for my teammate. And I think that's true in entrepreneurial too.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. So in many ways, actually, what you're describing, this fundamentals of a connect, align, and commitment, that is same values that actually subscribe to many successful startups, scale-ups, and corporations that are managing today. Actually, so what you're describing is not about just one particular function. It's about across organizations. So actually, it's about how we manage ourselves by building a team and being able to deliver something that one person cannot do alone.
Well, exactly. And the building the team is huge, you all know, right? Connecting the right people, right? And feeling that connection. So when we interviewed people, it wasn't their skill set that I was concerned about. That's easy. That we can figure that out, right? I want someone who's connected in their heart, that purpose higher than self. Are they aligned with the values? So the values of the Blue Angels, you might not know this, ambassadors of goodwill.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we're not about flying. We just use, like technology. Yeah, we had great technology. We had great airplanes. We just use that for a higher purpose. And that was to inspire greatness in another human being.
I see. So flying at 500 miles an hour, flying at distance of what I understand is about 16 inches apart.
Yeah, it varies, right? but can you imagine that? Okay, 16 inches.
Yeah.
You can see the cracks in the paint
Wow.
of the aircraft next to you, going 500 miles per hour. So talk about trust. So there's two key elements that we have to develop. Once we have the team, we have to develop high trust. And I'm talking trust where you can fly 16 inches, and I'm gonna not only trust myself, so my own training, but I have to trust my teammate. And I don't have to double check on them. And they're behind me. And then the debrief process is something we'll want to talk about. It's very unique on the Blue Angels, and that makes a difference.
Let's talk about trust, because I think fundamentally most organizations fall apart because initially the agenda is aligned and they want to go and they even committed, and somehow the trust angle always comes back, and you see so many founders in conflict, so many CEOs having issues with the management teams. How does it begin the trust journey, and does it start to selecting certain people? How does it work?
Yeah, so it does start on the selection process. I want to know what's in a person's heart, their values, not just what they can do for me, right? But here's the key. We build trust every day.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, oh, we're going to talk about building trust today. Every day we had a cadence of execution, the brief, execute, debriefs. In the debriefs is where we built trust, and we built it by being vulnerable. See, I think there's strength and vulnerability. So what I want to hear from my teammate is not what went well. I want to know what could have gone better. So I want someone, I call it lay it on the table. Be open and honest. Just lay it on the table. Don't hide mistakes. Don't hide things. In fact, I want to hear them quickly so we can make some adjustments. And the way we built trust, Young, was with verbal and nonverbal agreements. So it wasn't the statement of work. It wasn't the contract. That's, of course, given. We have to have that. Once we have that, I want to look you in the eye, and I want to say, you can count on me, I count on you. I'll give you an example of how we use verbal contracts. So Thumper and I, my opposer, we come at each other at 1,000 miles per hour closer, two jets, cross within a wingspan. If we're 1 second off, we're going to miss by 2 football fields. So a little bit of precision, right? Now, the way we did that was with a trust contract. Did we have standard operating procedures? Of course. Did we have contingency plans based on weather? I have to adjust just like an entrepreneur. I have to take my show, and sometimes the weather's good, sometimes the weather's bad. I got to adjust, right? But the way we did it was that morning, we looked each other in the eye, and I said, Thumper, I'll be on the flight line, which, let's say, is not the runway, it's the inboard edge of the runway. I won't be 5 foot left or 5 foot right. I'll set the altitude. I'll give you the command to execute a full stick deflection roll. My trust contract with my teammate was miss me. I mean, that's it. You put your life on the hands by saying, I trust you to do your job. And when you do that and you debrief it and you realize that, I was a little too close today or I wasn't close enough, that's where the trust gets built.
Let's talk about debrief process.
Yeah, okay.
That's something we actually don't do too often.
Yeah.
Because often we move on to the next project, right? So I think we don't reflect enough, and I know, including myself, we can improve on this, having this time to think and learn. But I think what you're also talking about is not just a process. It's about being open, being vulnerable. And, as a CEO, as your leaders, it's hard to be a vulnerable because you don't want to show your weakness. So can you tell us about what you did in Blue Angels to enable that process?
Well, it's the superpower, Young. It's the secret sauce, not the concept, okay? We all know the concept should be after action review, what can we learn? Typically companies do it or entrepreneurs do it when something goes wrong, okay? We changed that. Our mindset was completely different. Our mindset is, this is part of the DNA of who we are. We're gonna do this in a cadence. We're gonna do this all the time. And actually I wanna do it and I wanna celebrate my victories. I want to actually build this trust. So we did it every day because we flew every day. You can adapt this to different management styles. But the bottom line is the boss went first, usually. So just what you said, the CEO can set the tone. All right. And there's a video I'll share with your team where we're going and the boss says, hey, Gucci, I'm glad we went flying today. Gucci, I dropped you off a little bit low. And that very quick sentence, a lot was translated. The weather was bad that day. So when the boss said, I'm glad we went flying today, what he was really saying is, I could have canceled the air show. In fact, it would have been easier for me. I made the tougher decision. And then he said, I noticed something in my performance that was a little bit off. So when you as a CEO can demonstrate to others, it's like Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world, that, hey, we're not perfect, but we're in this together and we're going to grow. So I think that works. Sometimes, Young, you don't want to go first as a leader. Because you can
set the tone certain way
yeah.
that you don't want to shape.
Right, and so I want to stand back, I want to listen, and then get there. 5 dynamics. Okay, here's the key though. This is what makes it different, what I call a glad-to-behere debrief. You got to have a safe environment. And when I mean a safe environment, I don't mean just a physically safe environment like COVID's been teaching us. I mean a psychologically safe environment. I want people to feel that they can talk like you and I are talking. That's respect, by the way. So you got to develop respect. Second thing is, got to check your ego at the door. Yes. That's hard for some entrepreneurs. It's hard for fighter pilots.
It's harder as you go higher. Huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you get to people like you, you see it, right? Because when people have mastered that level, then the ability to check your ego at the door, it's about the we, not the I, and you just see it. So humility is a skill we look for in who we hire. So that's the second one. Third one is lay it on the table. So we talked about it earlier, open and honest communication. I don't want withholds. And withholds sometimes are, you don't want to look bad in front of your team. No, that's a withhold. It's okay. The fourth one is accountability, but here's the nuance. It's personal responsibility that turns into the ownership mentality. And we know as CEOs and entrepreneurs, God, you want that in your people, right? You want people to own the outcome, not just their role. But the secret sauce, the last one, is why I'm wearing my glad to be here. It's the gratitude. It's the appreciation. I call it joyful effort. When you add that to what we just talked about, it's a game changer.
So over the years, you must talk to and manage a lot of teams. What are the key attributes of a successful and high performance management team that you saw from your careers across organizations you managed?
Well, absolutely. Over 1,500 organizations, some of the best in the world. Fortunately, working with some of the firms like you have, right? Working with Microsoft, Google, BMW, Mercedes-Benz. It doesn't have to be just technology, right? But the key here is, number one, the culture. And here's what's interesting. As an entrepreneur, we get to set that. If you're growing your company, you get to set it. It gets harder when you've scaled. All right. But if you have a culture that people want to be a part of, that's that glad to be here mindset, then that is special, and don't lose that. Put extra time into reaffirming why you're doing what you're doing, the gratefulness, the gratitude, the impact you're making on humanity. I mean, that's to me the anchor, right? And it's kind of like, well, trust is the rebarb in the concrete. So you got to build the trust, right? So I think the key there is pick your right team.
Mm-hmm. Pick your right team.
Build trust contracts so that you can have a culture, and then you want to sustain it with this mindset of continuous improvement. On the Blue Angels, even though we got to 16 inches, we were trying to get an inch better every day. Wow. And I think that's the learn, grow, give mindset.
Let's change the subject a little bit. Tell me about your kind of background, personal background. How did you get to where you are, and why did you get to Navy, and why, so give us some rundown on your background.
So I was born in Germany. My dad was an Army officer and an engineer, and I love my dad. I want to grow up just like him. If I think about words like integrity and character, I don't need definitions. I just think of my dad, right? So
great role model.
Yeah, amazing. And my mom was love and compassion. So I actually grew up in a very supportive environment that said, hey, reach for your dreams. And I think most entrepreneurs, we're not afraid of dreaming big, right? And as a kid, moved around the United States. I've lived in 17 different locations, so I got a good flavor for culture. Decided I wanted to fly jets off aircraft carriers. And that came from an air show when I was 12 years old, a little boy. My dad takes me to an air show. I look up in the sky, I see these 6 magnificent blue jets. And I remember turning to my dad saying, Dad, I'm gonna do that, right? Something hit me in the heart, not the head. Now, like any entrepreneur, it's not easy. It took me 18 years from that dream to actually become that. Went to the Naval Academy, got rejected 3 times.
3 times.
3 times. They said I would not physically qualify.
You didn't get qualified for what?
They
The
said,
eyesight?
no, yeah, you would think so.
Yeah.
Too much protein in my urine. Like, what is that? You know, and what am I supposed to do about it? So you know how you can't control everything, but we can control our reaction. So my reaction is disappointment, like a lot of people out there. And then I said, man, plan B. Plan B was reapply. They rejected me again. Actually go through about a year medical waiver. It turned out I had nothing wrong with me. It was some little number off. But the point was I didn't give up. Right, and it took different paths to get there. Graduated from the Naval Academy, not top of my class, young. I graduated in half that allows the other half to be called the top.
Wait. That's interesting. But you became a Top Gun, so that's an interesting.
Well, because you know, being a fighter pilot is not just intelligence, right? You do
there
want.
comes. Yes.
There's other skill sets like situational awareness. Like when you're flying upside down, do you even know you're upside down? Where's the threat? It's high pressure stuff, so it's good. It's a great analogy for business because you got a lot coming on. So I found out that I was actually gifted with flying, but more importantly, not the stick and throttle, the head work, spatial orientation. Flew jets off aircraft carriers, so that's, that, let me tell you, that wakes you up.
Well, you know, I didn't know much about that thing other than figure plane land and lift. It's actually quite a bit of a deal to bring those things in up and down.
It's huge.
Such a short runway.
Short runway, picture this. It's a boat, so it's moving. It's moving away from you because it's making steam. It's an angled deck, so your landing area is not only moving away from you, it's moving away at an angle and it's rolling, and you have to be precise. You got to fly your eyeballs through a piece of sky 36 inches. When you cross that ramp at about 156 knots, you miss the tail hook misses the ramp by 11.2 feet. So there's not a lot of leeway. Then you go nighttime and you lose all your
Perspective.
perspective.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then the weather gets bad.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get low.
Oh, and then windy.
And
yes,
choppy. And windy and
right?
choppy. You're low on fuel and oh my gosh. And what I learned was the airplane doesn't know it's scary out there. The airplane doesn't know it's bad weather. The airplane doesn't know that the deck's moving. It's all your mind. So when you can control your own fear, and it's okay to be scared. I differentiate. I'm scared all the time. You know, like when we were paddling over the coral reef together. Remember that? We were on our sups paddling. You know, I'm looking down. I don't want to fall on the coral, but I'm not afraid. And I think there's a subtlety there, and I think that's entrepreneurial skill.
That is a really good analogy about navigating uncertain waters, but uncertain weathers, you know, uncertain conditions. I think that's actually what people do in startup world, and actually even corporate world, because things can change, right? The world, and what happens around the world, the geopolitical tensions, like policies, as well as just economic conditions. But for startups, it's even faster. So you have to adapt even quicker.
So we had a saying on the Blues, when you hit turbulence and you're flying in formation, turbulence like interest rates, like the markets, all the things that are changing, right? We fly through it together. So I'll say that again, we fly through it together. So if you're flying at 18 inches and you hit turbulence, you're gonna hit. Because, you know, we've all been in airplanes. If the airplane's dropped as a pilot, what's your reaction? You pull back on the stick. If it goes up, you push down. Well, guess what? Nobody can do that at the same level. So we did two things. One is we're going to say we're going to fly through it together, and we dampen our response, which is interesting. I get half the correction because I need to give my teammate time
to respond.
Otherwise,
it's going to change.
Otherwise, you're going to go like this, and you're going to hit. I think you respond and not react. And
Very interesting.
That could be a millisecond, or it could be a day or week. And when you have that into your mindset, and I think mindset is the key, then that's how you just naturally operate. You don't have to think about it.
So tell me now you went to the Navy, and then you became Blue Rangers, and then actually you actually flew Top Gun.
Yeah.
Right? Flew in Top Gun. Yeah. So tell us about the story as well.
Yeah. Well, that one is just, it's just.
I mean, we think of Tom Cruise as the Top Gun, but actually,
no, he didn't do the flying.
True Top Gun behind it, right? There you are. Yeah.
Well, not just me, all my teammates. Yeah. It's the classic thing in life. I was in the right place at the right time. So I'm flying jets off aircraft carriers, happened to be the Enterprise. We're off San Diego. It's 1986, and they come up and they said, "Hey, Hollywood's going to be coming on your carrier. They're making a movie called Top Gun. just be yourselves. And actually, I think the flying scenes, especially in Top Gun Maverick even, they're very accurate. Okay, we did a really good job. Now the storyline, that's something different.
It's a story.
But that was our life. That's what I was doing. And so I did that, flew jets off the carrier, flew the F-14 too, that's that movie in Top Gun, flew A-7s. But I wanted to be an instructor pilot. I wanted to be in a Blue Angels. So back to that story of 18 years, I was on the path, and you become like a section lead, a division lead, a strike leader. So now I'm moving up any company, VP, making your way up, right? And things are looking pretty good. I'm learning from my teammates. Young, one day I accidentally shoot a missile by mistake.
Oh my God, really?
I don't know what that is.
Live one?
A live
Missile.
I almost shoot down my own boss. Don't do this to
It sounds like a career-limiting move.
It's a total career limiting move. In fact, they could have fired me. We had a big debrief.
What happened there?
Well, it was a good lesson, okay? I was trying to jettison some hung ordnance, and I did not go through my checklist. I didn't go through my steps.
You became too comfortable?
I got too comfortable. And but it took me 3 days to figure this out, Young. Initially, I blamed it on, well, I didn't do my checklist. I got some switchology mixed up. What I didn't realize, I was grounded. They grounded me. 3 days later, it was complacency. I'd gotten too comfortable carrying live ordnance. And I learned that lesson, fortunately, without hurting anybody. And I think it's a big lesson in life and in business, too. Because we have blind spots out there.
Yes, we all do. We all do. Nobody's perfect, and we have our weakness, and we have our fear. Yeah. And then sometimes we overcompensate our fear, right? Yeah, these are some of the very interesting issues that I think you are really dealing with.
Well, it's good to have teammates around you who can help point that out, right?
Very good. Tell me about your shirt. Glad to be here. Yeah.
It's the essence, it's the ethos of a high-performance team. And it's excellence, operational excellence, with appreciation and gratitude. So what I've learned over life, and it came after the Blue Angels, we would say glad to be here every day when we're on the Blue Angels. We'd go through a debrief, and we do that open and honest communication. At the end of your comments, you always say glad to be here, because you're reaffirming to your teammates and yourself, you hear yourself. But what I've realized, Young, is it's really an ethos about life. Joyful effort.
Yes, being there.
Being generous with your time, like you right now. Thank you for allowing us to be out here.
No, thank you for joining me. And sharing this moment. Most importantly, sharing your lessons with others through this channel.
Usually mistakes, if I think back to all the leaders I got to work with, I don't always remember the ones who were great at something, but I sure remember the ones where I go, I'm not going to do it like that. If I get a chance, I'm going to be a little, and so I think learning from others' mistakes, especially in business, is just huge.
So many can happen. Yeah. So one of the things that I like to also go on is you made some career changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, very comfortable, Navy to civilian, and actually running your own company.
Yeah.
And that are actually helping people to organize and building high performance team. How was the transition like?
Well, I didn't plan it, Young. It's one of these things in life that I loved my Navy career. After the Blue Angels, you become an instructor pilot. So I was an instructor pilot. Then Blue Angels, we hire instructors because I want someone who not only can fly the airplane, they got to be able to teach it. Same thing in business, right? We were teaching our replacements. But to answer your question is, I love this word entrepreneur. I couldn't spell it, right? but I said, this sounds.
By the way, I think entrepreneur spelling come from French.
It does. Yeah. Now you know very well. Exactly. So I initially, when I needed a transition, for me it was school. I was fortunate to get selected, go to Stanford as a Sloan Fellow, and it's a different language, as you all know, your world. And I'm coming in there as a Navy fighter pilot. I didn't have any business experience, but I listened. And I realized one thing I do know is how to build high-performance teams, and I can share some leadership, and that's what I realized my teammates needed, my classmates needed. So after that, I was fortunate. I got to go into VC for about a year, and I realized, Young, that I wasn't a great investor. I was a better entrepreneur, right? And I had this passion to start the NASCAR of aviation. So Red Bull did it, where you bring in competition, air shows, And but I did it on a date called 9/11, 2001. And when I was in Manhattan closing my equity deal with ESPN, when the jets hit the tower.
Wow.
So there's a business that blows up right in front of your face. I mean, really blows up, because you're not starting an entertainment aviation company.
No.
And so I remember looking there going, oh my God. By the way, I had it was all my own money, $276,000. I didn't take any seed money yet. And I said, wow, what am I going to do? And I also, relationship dumped me. So I had a personal challenge, I had a business challenge, and I was pretty low. And I said, you know what, it's okay, I can work more out of it. And I went to a conference on personal growth, the growth mindset, and a light bulb moment. High performance teams, how do you turn them into business results? And that's what it's been for the last 2 decades. And I'm learning from people like you every day.
So thank you. So what are the key messages would you give to aspiring CEOs, entrepreneurs, even students who wants to imitate you, me, others?
Right. I think there's 4 steps. And I wrote it in a book called Fearless Success. Okay. And it came from, I remember strategic management theory would teach you vision, plan, execute, feedback loop. What's the vision? Come up with a plan, execute on a plan, hope you have feedback loop. And I realized, the top 1% do that. But why are the Blue Angels different? Why do we have a 300% improvement in 90 days?
That's amazing.
And that's with people who are highly skilled. Top Gun pilots come to the Blue Angels, 300% improvement in 90 days. So there is a process, there is a system, but before that is belief levels. So what I start to teach first is belief levels. How do you get commitment and buy-in to a vision? As entrepreneurs, we've got a strong vision, but how do you get commitment and buy-in throughout the whole team? So that's number 1. The brief to me is this very focused attention. And keep it simple. We all know that. Standard operating procedure, keep it simple. Center point is this alignment process. We have to get everyone aligned. So on the Blue Angels, we had 6 airplanes coming to 1 point. So what is your center point? So it's getting cleared out. But the last 2 are the key. It's trust, executing through high trust. So constantly building these trust commitments, and then using this glad to be here debrief process. The glad to be here, what it does is it resets belief levels. Now you get a spiraling up process. So you can overlay this on any company, on any situation, and you keep using it. And that's when it gets tight. That's when it gets tight.
So that is something anybody can practice, right? Any organizations, regardless of industry, vertical, horizontal. Yep. That is actually very profound. Now, the last question for you. So you and I watched the Top Gun 2 together, which, watching it as a non-trained person is not that much because I don't see it all. But watching with you was delightful because you can see all those things that are taking in that difficult maneuvers as well as technical and the implication of what they're working on. So what do you think about Top Gun 2? Is this realistic or are you... I'd love to get your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it realistic? It is absolutely in the flying. That mission that they were talking about is something I've done hundreds of times, okay? And basically what it is, it's a low altitude ingress. Remember they were flying below the canyons, below the radar, and you are terrain masking. And then when you go over a mountaintop, you roll inverted. You saw those pictures.
Yeah, I saw that,
the reason you roll inverted is you have more positive G, so I can pull down. It's fun going over treetops at 500 miles per hour upside down, right? And then you pull down, and then it's a pop-up attack. You pop, you roll inverted, you find your target, you laser it, you designate it, you have to hold it, and then you have a high G pullout. So the idea of the mission is something we train for. Now, you don't bring in Top Gun ex-instructor pilots for this top secret mission. The difference is we train everybody to do that.
I see.
So who's ever deployed is going to get that mission.
They can do it.
Yeah,
that's part of their job.
That's why training and mentoring is so important. And that's why it scales in the military, and it's important.
So in this case, it's because of the movie. Tom Cruise have to be the guy that have to come in. That's the movie part.
That's the movie.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
But the flying was accurate. You know how we had 6 IMAX cameras in the back, and we actually the actors were flown in the jet, and they started to feel that, and so the G forces are real. I think the biggest part of the storyline, though, for me, is it's a good metaphor for business. You have a bunch of people who are highly skilled. You got to come together as a team, because it's not about your individual skill. You have to have a mission that we all understand and we're committed to. And then you have to adapt, because we used to have a saying, the minute you get airborne, things change. So I've got to be able to adapt to the market.
And then you have to deliver.
And at the end of the day,
the constraints.
and you got to get back, you know, the idea.
Yeah. And you know, also I think there's very interesting leadership decisions. As a leader, you know, do you bring Top Gun back or not? You know, so decisions about selection.
Yes.
Decisions about taking risk with the people. I think they showed some of that profile there as well.
Yeah. And we did take risks. We call it calculated risk in this regard. When I was flying with the Blues, I remember I had a saying that what we did was not dangerous, but it's inherently unforgiving.
Right.
And that's a mindset, because most people say it's crazy what we're doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't, because we put in the processes and the systems, and more importantly, the culture of trust and glad to be here. When that was in there, you take situations like business, which can be very challenging, and you can actually operate at a high level.
Last question for you.
Yeah.
So you believe and you teach the fearless leadership, right? What are the most fearful thing you ever done?
Oh my God. You know, I tell you, Young, I get scared all the time. The most one that hurt me the most was a landing on an aircraft carrier at night, where I got underpowered. I'm about to crash on the deck of the carrier, and I've seen the videos. There's one big fireball, and I think I'm gonna die, right? And what happens in that moment, I don't know if you've ever had time compression where things slow down. The whole world slowed down. And I thought I was gonna die, and this energy leaves my body, no kid. I'm looking down at myself going, there'll be no pain. Now, fortunately, I don't die. It surprised me. The energy came back my body. I'm scared. I can't.
You cannot feel anything.
Oh, I can't feel it. My legs are shaking. I'm dry heaving. I'm puking, right? And I was like, what is that? Now, guess what? You go up the next night. You do.
You have to, right? Otherwise
You have
can't.
to. And you have to control your mind. And you go, wait a minute, what did I learn? And I figured out, don't go low. I learned that. I haven't done that again. I was a 6-time top carrier pilot after almost dying.
I see.
So I think the key here is, you know, I want people who've experienced challenges.
Well, thank you very much, John, for your inspiring talk. I really enjoyed it. I hope my audience can enjoy it as well.
Thank you, Young. Glad to be here.
Great. Thank you.